morning show right here on the Rise News channel. It's time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Security agencies have stepped up surveillance of the Federal Capital Territory, Nasarawa and Kogi states in readiness to deal with what they call planned attack by Boko Haram and Darussalam. The security beef up followed an intelligence report that suspected terrorists were planning a ground offensive on Nigeria's political capital and the two contiguous states. The Nigerian Customs Service had earlier raised the alarm through a circular dated September 4, and the Boko Haram insurgents had camped around the Federal Capital Territory while planning to attack selected targets in the city. But defense headquarters have assured Nigerians and Abuja's and the residents of Abuja that the states in question, that the armed forces and other security agencies were on red alert to combat crime and ensure effective surveillance. Rise News' sister outfit Tuesday gathered at the weekend that massive troop deployment in the affected states, which began Wednesday, had intensified while enhanced security cordon was strewn around the nation's capital. What is happening at Iswa?
And that's the billion-dollar question here this morning, Rufai. You mentioned two groups, the Darussalam group. A lot of people may not have heard of them, but just last week, the federal government of Nigeria declared them a terrorist group. Now, what has happened is that this particular group had terrorized Niger State, Nasarawa State, and a bit of Kogi State. They went in the name of preaching to their congregation, but the military then found out that in the course of preaching to this congregation, they were brainwashing them to say and selling their ideology. And that's where the big question is, just how powerful is this group to want to coordinate attacks in the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja? But on the good note here is that this intelligence is coming from not one of the core intelligence agencies we have in the country. This comes from the Nigerian Customs agents in Nigeria. So you can say intelligence, interagency cooperation is what we're seeing here, which is good. And, the security agents have been placed on red alert. They are reassuring the public to go about their normal businesses. However, be on the watch out, be on the lookout, give information for those suspected movements you're seeing in your localities. I think that for the first time, perhaps, the residents of these areas may just be confident in what the security agencies are doing. But how come we're having terrorist groups again planning to attack the Federal Capital Territory? You recall that just recently the president had said the Boko Haram insurgents are scavengers desperate for food. I don't think this is a move by scavengers.
Dr. Wati.
Well, the primary responsibility of government is to ensure the security and well-being of the people. And in this particular case, we have seen the government being proactive, acting on the basis of intelligence provided by the Nigeria Customs Service, and mobilizing efforts to make sure that the Federal Capital Territory is safe. Surveillance has been ramped up, and this has been extended to the neighboring states of Niger and Nasarawa. You will recall that in the past there were attacks on, outskirts of Abuja, and even reports of terrorist attacks in Nasarawa. And so it's not unusual that the Federal Capital Territory and its environs would be targeted by terrorists or persons that are evil-minded, considering the strategic importance of the Federal Capital Territory. So for now, we can commend what we have seen in terms of quick response, in terms of interagency cooperation, and that needs to be thoroughly emphasized because part of the major omission in the security operations in the country, we've said in the past, is because of the failure of the the relevant agencies to coordinate. So we hope that this collaboration will be something that they will sustain. However, apart from Federal Capital Territory, let us go a step further and say that, look, other parts of Nigeria are just as under threat. Places where you have banditry, where you have kidnapping. So what is important is that, yes, Federal Capital Territory and the environs are important, but it is the entire country that is crying desperately for security. Look at the incident that occurred in Lagos the other day when we were told that some hoodlums attacked the residence of Chief M.K. Abiola of blessed memory. Yes. Now, somebody was telling me that as armed robbery returned, because there was a time, in this country, people say, armed robbers are, yes, they are no longer threatening the lives of persons. But we're beginning to see, an increase in all kinds of crime. And it is important for the government to do everything possible within its power and to make the resources available to ensure that, the rising spate of crime is something that is checked.
All right, very valid point there made, Dr. Abati. We'll just quickly go to the next story. President Muhammadu Buhari will be in Niamey, Niger Republic, to participate in the 57th ordinary session of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government. The one-day summit will deliberate on special reports on COVID-19 to be presented by the Nigerian president, who was appointed ECOWAS champion in the fight against COVID-19 during the extraordinary virtual summit of ECOWAS on the 23rd of April. President Buhari will be accompanied to the summit by ministers and other top government officials. Other issues will be discussed include the alarming rise in incidents of terrorism, insurgency, and banditry and piracy. The disruption of the democratic process by the military in Mali will also receive further attention. Right move, right time?
All I can say is that expectations are high. I mean, their plate is full. There's a lot going on in the region, and we'll see what will come out from this meeting.
Well, I mean, the heads of state and government of ECOWAS, they meet on a regular basis. This particular meeting is going to consider some of the conclusions of the 44th ordinary session of the meeting of heads of state and government. And some of the issues they're going to consider include, of course, conflict mediation within West Africa. And, there are top issues that may come up at that meeting. Mali, of course, will be top of the list in terms of the conflict situation within the sub-region. I imagine that the security crisis in terms of, terrorism, spread of banditry, and the mutual interest of the various leaders. And then, of course, it will also perhaps provide opportunity for Nigeria and Ghana. President Akufo-Addo of Ghana, when they held this legislative assembly meeting led by Gbajabiamila, the Speaker of Nigeria's House of Representatives. Professor Akufo-Addo had said that, look, he's going to make sure that when the next time he has the opportunity to talk to President Buhari, they may reconsider the GIPC Act, which imposes an equity amount of $1 million for foreigners doing business in Ghana. So we hope that that will happen. And then, of course, COVID-19, which is something around which ECOWAS have been working together. And by the way, President Buhari is the champion of the COVID-19 process in West Africa, efforts to share intelligence, share resources, and cooperate. So I think that will also be a major issue. But I hope this will provide an opportunity to take a firmer position on Mali and for Nigeria and Ghana to talk on the sidelines on the question of trading and foreigners in Ghana.
All right, great insight there by Dr. Abati. That's all on headline news. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael, and Aaron Akerjala to give us updates on Africa and global business and COVID-19. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us Africa business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Diso, and good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
We kick things off with the Central Bank of Nigeria. They've released a framework that is supposed to facilitate, or rather, an intervention facility for the National Gas Expansion Program. So this is essentially telling us about, we sit on 188 trillion cubic feet of gas, and essentially how the Central Bank is going to try to stimulate investment in the value chain. So first summary here, it's to the tune of 250 billion naira to stimulate the gas value chain. It's the collaboration with the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. The large-scale projects are going to be funded under the PAIF, which is, of course, the Power and Airlines Intervention Fund. Smaller scale projects are going to be through the Nursal Microfinance Bank, and or the acronym there is the Agribusiness Small Medium Enterprise Investment Scheme. So that's essentially how the big picture is going to work. Drilling down further, if we move on to our next summary, of how this is going to work. So for larger scale projects under the Power and Airlines Intervention Fund, that's not to exceed 10 billion. As far as working capital for the obligors that are going to be accessing that 10 billion, that's a maximum of 10 billion. Working capital shouldn't be more than 500 million naira. For the smaller scale projects, those are not to exceed 50 million naira. The obligors, the companies shouldn't have a working capital of more than 5 million naira. Of course, this is going to be a loan. The interest rate is at 5% until February the 28th of 2021. From March, it's going to be 9%. As far as the tenure is concerned, for the larger scale projects, it's a maximum of 10 years with a 2-year moratorium, giving them 24 months before they start paying back the loan. For the smaller scale, under the Agribusiness Small Medium Enterprise Investment Scheme, 5 years with a 2-year moratorium. So, I mean, at this point, central bank is in, intervention fund for gas, intervention fund for agriculture, intervention fund for healthcare, intervention fund for manufacturing. We haven't quite here yet. Let's pause this. We're not quite at this stage yet. We'll get to this in a second. But the understanding is that with what the central bank is doing here, there's some camps are saying that the central bank is stylishly trying to reduce the interest rates in the country, because with a number of companies, we're in a low interest rate environment now. If a number of firms are saying, okay, if I'm going into gas, if I'm going to invest in gas, or I'm going into agriculture, or I'm going into healthcare, or I'm going into manufacturing, I can access interest from the Central Bank of Nigeria at a lower rate than I would be able to from a deposit money bank. So it's possible, because I understand in one quarter one earnings call with one of the tier 1 banks, they were saying that, look, they may have to reduce interest rates because of what the central bank is doing. So that's what one side is saying. The other side of the argument is saying that, listen, you are trying to fix productivity issues with monetary policy, and that might not be able to work. Because, I mean, you have to look at GDP for each of the different sectors, like agriculture. Despite the amount of money that's been put in there, it's been improving, but it should be at a higher rate than what we're seeing. So it's two camps that are arguing there that, look, this could be a clever scheme to reduce interest rates and also stimulates development. On the other hand, might not be enough. We still need to have the other investments in infrastructure and so on to boost what we're trying to do here. But still good on the central bank in trying to boost this. So now we move on to the next, what we just saw now. Well, our sister publication This Day is reporting that this, we're seeing it in the circular here that was put out, a letter to all banks. The central bank is requesting a PND, post-note debit instruction, on 38 gaming and betting firms. This is only the first page. The other half of them is on the second page. We only put the first page up here. It's understood that this is because of, according to what This Day is reporting, foreign exchange transactions that were not legal. And so with a post-note debit, that essentially freezes the accounts of these companies that have accounts with the deposit money banks while an investigation is being carried out by the central bank. So again, that's at the top of today's This Day newspaper, which is being reported. So the central bank is very serious about what's been going on with conserving foreign exchange and clamping down on companies that commit infractions that are not legal. So again, a total of 38 firms with a post-note debit. Those accounts has essentially been frozen. We'll move on to our next discussion here. If you remember, on Friday we talked about the Lagos State government's, the Lagos State Film and Video Censors Board, the Executive Secretary, Mr. Bamidele Balogun, signing off on a letter that requested a 5% levy from content creators in Lagos. It turns out, according to, this is Gawat Jubril, Senior Special Assistant to Governor Sanwo-Olu on New Media. He says here, Lagos State has no 5% levy on audio and visual content on physical and digital platforms. The Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Film and Video Censors Board has been suspended. That's what the tweet here says. If you take a look at the next slide, you'll actually see the letter with a big stamp of unauthorized. Remember, Jason Njoko of Iroko TV put out a tweet saying that, why is this happening? That, he's going to have to address this later. So it looks like there's been some blowback with regards to what's going on here. However, we do. Let's take a look at the next tweet from Mr. Jubril. So he's saying there's no levy. Government hereby disassociates itself from the said announcement in the media. Executive Secretary, who was not authorized to make such an announcement. He then says the 5th pillar of themes agenda is supposed to be entertainment and tourism. He also said the Lagos State government understands that in this period of COVID-19, probably not the best time to be applying the levy, but they are disassociating themselves from it. However, we did reach out to Mr. Bamidele Balogun before this suspension was announced, and he directed our media inquiry to a Mr. Rahman Raji, who is with a creative industry group. And according to them, they're the ones who lobbied the government to put this levy together. We'll be talking to him on the Global Business Reports later this morning. But there's more to this story, because some are saying, how is it that this levy was put forward and the Lagos State government apparently didn't know about it and this was unauthorized? He said they lobbied them 6 months ago and they knew about it. So we'll get into that on the Global Business Report later this morning. There's a report here in Bloomberg, in fact, according to the rice production officials in Kebbi State, that we lost about 25% of our output for rice. This is a chart showing the amount of rainfall that Kebbi received, their precipitation in millimeters, in the month of June and July. It kind of flipped around. So the red bar is the average precipitation that Kebbi received for 2020. The blue bar, or indigo bar, however you want to call that color, is the average from 2012 through to 2019. So you can see that it was lower in June, but you can see in July, the average for 2020 exceeded the last 7 years of rainfall, which of course, contributed to the flood that we've seen in Kebbi and destroyed the rice output. Remember, President Buhari said last week that he's concerned about the food prices rising. The destruction of rice production output is going to, of course, cause lower output, which is going to reduce supply, which is going to increase prices of rice, which is going to contribute to food inflation we're already seeing increasing. So interesting chart there that we're seeing the proof behind the increased rainfall in Kebbi. It's been mixed though. There's been other areas in like the southwest that have been drier than some of the other states. Finally, I understand Mr. Mr. Mustafa Chike Obi is going to be on the show earlier today. Yeah. And I'll be looking forward, because Doctor has talked a lot about the refineries resulting in lower prices for fuel for Nigerians. And he says, yeah, the belief that refineries will lead to cheap PMS is not supported by facts. Nothing major produced in Nigeria has ever been cheaper than the foreign alternative. Not sugar, rice, textiles, flour, or even cement. Importation of PMS will be banned and will pay more. So I'm not saying anything on that. I'm just looking forward to the discussion on the morning show.
Thank you so much, Rotus. It's a shame we've got many issues to raise, but no time for that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Moving on to business update now. Michael Wilson-Johnson from London. Michael, good morning.
Morning. As far as Asia is concerned, a fairly mixed outlook, actually. The Nikkei dipped. Now, this is an interesting one. This is about SoftBank and how SoftBank had bet on tech stocks actually rising. And, of course, its position had to alter rather a lot as the market decided to fall on Thursday and Friday. And it also turns out that SoftBank itself was one of the so-called whales, i.e. big but under the surface, under the tech stock boom. And that was one thing that made that tech stock fall actually slightly bigger. And also, it's expected that as more traders in Asia get back from their vacations, they may well withdraw some of their positions as well when they see how things have weakened. China, now a run of trade data coming up starting today. The ones today, exports up 9.5%, imports down by 2.1%. That's the worrying thing, because it means that China's internal demand is less than people actually thought it was. The fact that exports were high is being put down once again to the large amount of personal protective equipment, PPE, that was actually sold to various import points around the world. But the internal demand thing is the worrying thing about China. It's also being reported that the Trump administration is going to put export restrictions on Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation. Its shares fell over 19%. The importance of this is it's Hong Kong-based Chinese company. SMIC relies on American chip-making equipment. And if it were added to the so-called US entity list, i.e. the list of businesses that may not do business with China, it would hurt production. Contrast with Morgan Stanley saying that they reckon the yuan, China's currency, could become the world's third largest reserve currency. That would be behind the euro and the dollar, of course, in 10 years' time. Let me recap what happened on Friday for you. The non-farm payrolls is usually the big number, but that was actually, even though it was a slight improvement, was sort of disregarded by falls in the tech in the tech sector, excessive valuations. Well, we've been talking about that for weeks, haven't we? And it was a brutal decline. And it also, that started on Thursday, carried through till Friday, as you know. The update, I have to say, as far as jobs are concerned in the United States, added to the narrative of things are slightly improving there. The unemployment rate dropped from 10.2 to 8.4%, which is not bad going these days. It might take, though, unfortunately, some of the pressure off the Republicans and the Democrats to once again, please, would they sit down and agree this stimulus package at some stage? But nothing so far. European markets slated to perform some sort of recovery today. As far as the UK is concerned, the markets will be looking at sterling. Prime Minister last night saying that if a free trade deal with the EU is not negotiated by October the 15th, then we will actually walk away, plus a market bill, an internal market bill. Now, this is an earthquake as far as the negotiations are concerned in the UK, and its detail is still to be decided. It's only a bill, it's not been passed yet, but it's an internal market bill that will apparently, according to the FT, eliminate the legal force of parts of the Brexit agreement. It gets terribly complicated. I've been listening to some of the comment this morning from government ministers who are saying it's simply tying up some loose ends. But, you know, you can never tell in these negotiations. It's all about noise and not so much about news, as I've often said about these kind of things, until it's actually all decided. Also caused a lot of businesses in the UK to extend the furlough scheme. About a third of companies are apparently going to lay off staff, they want this scheme under which the Treasury paid, our Finance Department paid 80% of wages to be extended beyond the end of October. Commodities, gold drifted lower last week, but those lows of last week still comfortably above the lows of August. So generally speaking, people are relatively bullish about it. Oil tumbled a bit last week, and the bearish mood of the markets didn't really help energy stocks at all. Now, week ahead coming up. So we've got on Friday UK GDP. As you know, the British government we were fairly slow to lock down, and when it dropped hugely, down 20%. Never happened before as far as records are kept. Largest negative reading on record. Since then, things have begun to improve. ECB rate decision on Thursday. There won't be any change as far as interest rates are concerned there. However, there may be more news about how the pandemic emergency purchase program will be distributed. If you remember me saying at the time, there's a lot of resistance from the frugal four within it. The northern states, the north and south divides within the EU writ large about this, and it finally transpired that the southern 390 billion will be issued as grants, and 500 billion will be loans. US CPI, this inflation figures on Friday. That's important too. We don't normally like inflation, as you know, but it does tend to point towards an economy actually increasing. And as I said, finally, trade data from China. We got those export figures today. We're going to get CPI and PPI tomorrow and Wednesday, respectively. And finally, the US jobless weekly claims, which we'll be looking at. As I said, it's clear that something is actually happening in the US economy, but all those statistics are still stubbornly low. That's your global view.
Michael, quickly, maybe you dwell a little bit more on the internal market bill, which seems to look like a plan by the Prime Minister Johnson and some members of his party to make sure that the trade talks with the EU does not succeed. Already the top negotiator, was his name, Michel Barnier, has been saying that the UK has not been cooperative. Labour is protesting. The Scottish government sounds like they've not been carried along. Do you agree with the Prime Minister that a no-deal Brexit will still be a good outcome? Because that's the line that the Prime Minister seems to be pushing.
Yeah, an orderly Brexit would be a good outcome. I think, again, what we're seeing here is more pressure being put on the negotiating process. It's essential to do that. Now, you will have seen over the weekend that we think we're going to get the former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott as our trade envoy to negotiate post-Brexit trade deals. So a lot is depending on this. That's incurred an enormous amount of opposition from various parts of the country here. However, I think if you want to get something done, then you need some sharp elbows, and Tony Abbott certainly has that. As far as Boris Johnson is concerned, this is a continuation of, if you remember, before we even started talking to each other, all those months ago, right, the turn of sort of late 2019 after the election, he was the person that put some fire under these negotiations, and I suspect this is what's happening now. I don't know the answer to your question. I'm just saying that I think this is part of a negotiating process, and something needs to work. And as far as Michel Barnier is concerned, who's supposed to be, as I understand it, an Anglophobe, European leaders are saying we will actually take over now and give them something to talk about. So if he's sort of, as I understand it from reports over the weekend, being slightly moved aside to get these negotiations going. Either way, they need to happen. But as I keep saying to you, everybody is making it very, very, very difficult indeed for the UK to try and get anything out of this, because they do not want to encourage the populist movements in the EU elsewhere.
Okay. All right. A great insight. I'd love to talk to you about the job market in America and Labor Day coming, juxtaposition of job numbers, but we don't have time for that. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Really appreciate you. I'll move on to Aaron Akirjala now for a quick update on COVID-19. Aaron, India seems to be leading the way with COVID. What is happening? Is this the Indian resurgence?
Yeah, good morning to you, Rufai. Good morning to you, Doctor. Adesua, good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you again.
It's good to have you back.
Yes, it's good to be back. I was actually saying hail and hearty. And let's actually, before we come into India, let's actually look at the world figures in terms of COVID-19. We've actually crossed the very grim milestone, looking at the number of cases right now globally. And globally right now, we have well over 27 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world. And we've been looking at how things are actually playing out. The numbers keep rising, of course, due to the fact that now that several countries are actually lifting off lockdown, lifting off restrictions, certainly it will rise. Of course, places that are seeing prevalence in number of cases, Israel, they're thinking of going into another lockdown in Israel with how things are actually going on. Argentina is also seeing a sharp rise, same as Brazil. Brazil are also experiencing a major rise, although not as much as it was in July coming into August. And Spain also, we've spoken about Spain and the fact that they've gone into the second wave of COVID-19. Moving on to the next slide also explains the US also, although they are claiming that they are beginning to flatten the curve, but they saw a massive rise and things are beginning to go down right now, whether it's due to reduced testing, but without a doubt, the US has tested more people than any other country in the world. Paraguay, Iraq, and Chile actually makes up for the numbers of those. Since we're talking about the US, looking at the figures in the US, 6.2 million confirmed cases has also been recorded in the US, over 188,000 deaths at the moment, but you can actually see that particular graph there. It actually says a lot from what it was like in July into August. Things are beginning to slow down in terms of COVID-19, but 22 states are also experiencing a sharp rise in the number of COVID-19. If we move on to the next slide to actually help us with some of these states, North Dakota, South Dakota, we're saying Guam, Iowa, Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, Alabama, Kansas, Oklahoma, all the states, you can actually see the graph there indicating that there are rise in several key states, but not as much as we experienced in July and August. Now, moving on also, we can actually even see that even the deaths, as we get into the next slide, even the deaths are also pretty low. But moving away from the US, now let's get into India, because we spoke about India. You mentioned India, Rufai. We are seeing 4.2 million. It's now it's crossed the 4 million mark. As a matter of fact, it took them just 13 days to move from 3 million to 4 million, as against when you look at the likes of Brazil, which it took a longer time, about 15 days thereabout, and even the US also. You get to see some of these things happen, and I must say that what is happening in India, we've been speaking about the number close to about 1 billion people, more than 1 billion in that particular country. And at the moment, with it spreading to every nook and cranny in India, certainly we are seeing a massive, massive rise there. Although Narendra Modi and his people and his party are saying that since the mortality rates are still low and also the recovery rates are very high, that they are doing something very right. The mortality rate is less than 2%, which is something, but you can actually see there is a sharp rise in the number of cases, and they are also attributing it to the fact that they've been going on aggressive testing. Over 1 million are tested a day at the moment. 15 million have been tested in India, and they are claiming that that's the reason why we're seeing sharp numbers. And with the fact that they are also opening up economies, we can actually take it away from them. But before we actually go, let's just quickly put it out on the table concerning Australia and what they're trying to do. Not only have they actually shelled out money, because they've actually put in about 1.5 billion for vaccines. Now they are going to get 2 vaccines, and the Prime Minister is telling everyone that, as a matter of fact, they're going to support their own vaccine, and the one they will be getting from the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca will be produced, most of them will be produced in Australia. So they are looking at put together from the Queensland vaccine that they will be getting, University of Queensland vaccine that they will be getting. They are looking at upward of 80 million vaccines for a country that is well over 30 million. And they're saying between January and February, they should be able to hatch this thing out. And if everything goes as planned, certainly most, or if not all of the Australian citizens will be vaccinated.
All right, amazing insight there you shared. But I want to talk about India specifically, because the world thought that we had gotten to a point, and with the work on vaccine coming up, that COVID-19, yes, we can actually push this back when it coincides with the vaccine coming up. But India has proved otherwise. And I will segue this into the BBC analogy that came out a couple of weeks ago that caused a big uproar here. I think it was Andrew Harding that wrote that report that was talking about poverty. India shares almost the same similarities, with Nigeria as regards that. There's a level of poverty, there's a prevalent level, but you can see the cases keep going on. So what is it that is happening in India that makes Africa even different? Because now I want to interrogate even more. Because obviously with this increasing spread, it shows that it's not really even about poverty. It might not even be really about sanitation. Because take, for instance, India has one of the biggest and the largest, condition of open defecation in the world, just like Nigeria. But despite all of that, the cases keep increasing. It's not increasing that way in Nigeria. I just want you to make a juxtaposition of those two countries.
Rufai, we've been saying this most of the time. When we see disparities like this around the world, it's all down to testing. India has gone into an overdrive in terms of testing. Like we said, over 1 million are being tested a day. Do we test up to that? We've not, as a matter of fact, in the entirety of this period of COVID-19, we've not even tested up to 500,000, while India are testing over 1 million a day. Right now, they are standing at 15 million, and they are saying that that's the reason why. And also, when you look at how things have actually played out in India, most of the people, the prevalent demographic in India are made up of the young bracket, just like we also see in Africa, and that is big factor. And there are also claims. Now, the point is this: we're even talking about the numbers in India, that they're well over 4 million. Now, doctors and experts are saying that is if you have to put a 3x behind that to actually ascertain the actual number of confirmed cases. That means if they were to do major counting and actually report as normal, not do underreporting like we've actually seen happen in India, then probably we'll be looking at as upwards of 12 million cases in India. But the government are still insistent that they are going about it the right way, and they should be able to cap this one up very soon. And also, in terms of vaccine, I just need to throw this one in. They've also created a facility that as soon as the AstraZeneca and some other vaccines actually push through, they can actually come to India, mass produce them, and give it to the citizens.
But what is the plan here? Because despite this numbers, yes, massive testing, India is reopening its economy. Businesses, markets, everywhere is open. So I'm trying to understand how they're going about this. The numbers are increasing, but they're opening up.
Well, you know that Prime Minister Modi insists that they will have to just open up the economy because it also affects the kind of balance that we talk about in terms of how you handle COVID-19 and how you allow businesses to run because the people still need to survive. But there are some indications from India that may be of interest to us. Most of the persons affected we're told are people in the rural areas. And then a lot of migrants are also coming back And, you know, there is the menace of COVID fatigue. And it's not just India that is suffering from COVID fatigue. You see it, you know, in many places, also in Europe. People are just getting tired. People just have this attitude, let's just carry on. But of course, you are right about the high rate of testing in India. Maybe there's something we can learn in terms of how they're trying to balance the options. And then the virus, despite the seroprevalence, is the less virulent strain that they say, you know, they have in India. But you are quite right. Recovery rate is 77%. Fatality rate is just 1.7% in spite of the high figures. But any update on the resumption of international flights in Nigeria?
Well, hoping let's see what becomes of it. Of course, they've actually rolled out some countries, and time might not permit us to actually go into some countries and some airlines that will not be permitted to land here in Nigeria. It's still a little bit sketchy in terms of reopening. Let's see what becomes of it. But we are hoping that flights actually resume, and more importantly, they actually monitor this, because just speaking about that, France, for example, are a country that have been taking this COVID-19 very serious. We've actually spoken about the fact that France has even entered the second wave, and they've even listed some other countries, some other cities like Lille, Strasbourg, and Lyon in France, which are actually gone into the red alert zone, which has taken about 28 places or counties in France in that red alert zone. So some of these countries, so when the UK decided to even close down the border and tell anybody that is returning from France that they must quarantine for 14 days, they were very, very right. And the country in Nigeria too needs to actually pay attention to several, or the rising cases in several of these countries.
Okay, Aaron, thank you so much for that. You know, great insight.